have some good news before we start out with anything else. The good news is our corn price projection was finally hit. 7.18. How's that for excitement, guys?
There we go.
Of course, it didn't last. You know, a little different action for today. Let's just go into the meat of the matter and just jump into quite a few things we have laid out. As everybody knows, as far as this Libya news today, this is not really a main market mover in terms of actual fundamentals. Jim asked me today, well, how about all these other countries, all these groups with unrest? What do they actually mean for us in terms of the U.S. market? The bottom two guys on this list, Egypt and Tunisia, of course, they've already got their unrest kind of finished up, and they've got governments kind of in transition right now. The top four are ones currently which might have some measures of unrest going on. It's interesting to see that Egypt and Tunisia, these guys are already a done deal. If you look at this chart here, they're actually the only ones who actually make any significant matter right now to actually any of our purchases: corn, soybeans, wheat, and beef or pork. You can note that some of these other four wild cards out here, they do have a little business here with us as far as soybeans, not enough to be worthwhile. You can certainly argue that maybe some on wheat. But as far as anything else, you're not really looking at too much here. Of course, with beef, it's pretty much an Egypt market, otherwise it's it. And obviously, as we can tell, since these are Middle Eastern countries, we do no pork business to these six guys in trouble right now. So, but it is interesting to see that I was a little surprised to see that Egypt actually was a little bigger corn buyer than I would thought at this time here. But main point, of course, is this is not, of course, a fundamental news story that changes actual grain flows or meat flows. This is certainly a change in psychology and a concern as far as this goes. So we've got some lower prices here today, and obviously we might open just a little bit lower here tomorrow. But realistically, what's next on the plate? Well, Thursday and Friday, we have USDA does their own annual Outlook conference. They call theirs the Agriculture Forum. And in preparation for that, Reuters Newswire asked us, as well as a few other analysts, what our thoughts were for acreage. So in other words, they said, well, let's see what the private industry is thinking on acreage before USDA gives their number here on Thursday. As far as the baseline USDA talked about, 92, this is the number from last Monday of last week. The average trade is saying, well, we're probably about a half million acres under that. 91.5 is the average trade guess for corn. So not as bad on the corn end. For the soybeans, the trade actually, I was a little surprised. The trade's very close to what USDA has for soybeans. They're still saying a number implying an increase in acreage. As far as this goes, remember from USDA's baseline, this is a 600,000 acre increase. The average trade was right now looking at 450,000 acre increase. So as far as the beans, I was a little surprised that they had a large number here. But the main point is going in front of this USDA's forum, we've got smaller corn acres, what the trade is thinking, and slightly smaller soybean acres. Now, how about this USDA report, or it's not actually a report. How about this USDA Outlook Conference? So they have their own guesses on what they do, on what they think is going to go on for acreage. Then on March 30th, they'll come out with their actual survey. So keep in mind, there's the tan bars here. These are they're thinking, their own personal viewpoints and their economic models. The red is what the farmers actually tell them in the surveys. In general, they get the direction right. You can actually argue it's not too hard to get the direction right. You will note that there's quite a few years where there's quite a bit of difference here between what they actually say in February and actually what the survey shows. This chart shows that change. So how wrong is USDA? And you can tell by this chart, there's quite a few years where they have over 1 million acre difference between what they told us they thought in February and what USDA actually said. In fact, in 7 of the past 13 years, they've been off by at least 1 million acres. So keep in mind that this report, or these numbers we'll talk about on Thursday, this is not gospel. This is not set in stone. This is simply their viewpoint here. And as you can tell by these bars here, they've been off a pretty good amount. Over 1 million acres, that's enough to move market in this case. So we've got this Thursday, Friday stuff in front of us. How about the near-term stuff right now? Well, is there any type of indication, and we sent out this email today, is there any way we can monitor this fund trading, this fund action in the last couple of weeks and say this is a market top or this is not a market top? And the results were not too easy, not too clear. As far as corn, we've got 2 weeks now of, this is going to be the third week now of sales. In the last couple weeks, they knocked off about 15,000 contracts. And this is, but when I'm talking about the funds here, these are the managed money, or the guys who go both long and short. So this is the third week of sales right now. We've had other years where they've gone 6, in fact 8 weeks in a row of straight sales before. So keep in mind, this is something we're watching, but we're not in the panic phase yet as far as watching the fund news on this end. Soybean side, this is the third week of sales. They knocked off about 30,000 contracts in the previous 2 weeks here. And wheat, this is actually on the second week of sales. They knocked off about 12,000. So based on these charts, these really not major declines yet. This is surprising to see that based on the fund selling, and of course these are only through last Tuesday. They don't include the significant sales, which happened from Wednesday through current. So these might change a little bit here once we get these new numbers. But the email we sent out, basically we looked at the last major market rally we had, which is 2008, and saw kind of what kind of the fund action from on this last week or two in front of there. And as far as that goes, too bad this didn't come out in color, but most of these were some sales here. We had some light sales. We had one good purchase on this uptrend, but once we reached a peak, we did have some moderate sales. Keep in mind, these are not actually big sales, 16,000, 9, 6. It wasn't until we're on the tail end of things, kind of like today's action, we actually saw numbers running 20 to 40,000 contract sales. As far as this recent action we've had here, kind of same story. Down 2 weeks ago, down 13,000 as far as the sales, and I wonder if we're getting this type of big number here, maybe a 20 to 40,000 trade on what we're making right now here. So it's certainly a big question. And Friday's report hopefully will give us a little more indication of what's going on the fund end here. But as far as this goes, we all know fundamentals haven't changed. We'd certainly look for a little lower open tomorrow, but maybe by Thursday, Friday, with that new USD information, we'll be back to trading more or less kind of the fundamental viewpoint, or see what they got to say as far as the